I've talked a bit about the fact that your job doesn't end when your code merely works. But it may be hard to know where you go from there. You know you need to do more, but what more can you do besides making things work? What should you even be aiming for? Working alongside developers who do have more experience and who can provide some mentorship helps. But let's dig into some specific goals that you can set for yourself. My friend Tony Dewan, who builds a lot of cool stuff and who teaches college web design courses from time to time, came up with a scale to measure the quality of a developer's work. Guess what he called it? Tony Dewan's Scale of Awesomeness. In context, he provided this guide to his students to help them understand how their work would be graded. But it's also useful for professionals and aspiring professionals, like yourselves, who want to judge their own code. I've reworded parts of it just a tad, but this is basically what Tony said. Who can read? Ian. What's that say? Does it work? Does it meet the functional requirements? Remember, this is just the first point on the scale. Just getting something to work is the absolute minimum. In the context of Tony's class, he told them it's enough to probably pass the class. At work, it may be enough to keep from getting fired. But if there are cutbacks, you also may be the first to go. What's that say? I can't read so good. Yeah.
Does it work well?
Does it work well? Is the user experience acceptable? And remember, there's more to user experience than just beauty. In simple cases, this could mean making sure that on page load the focus is in a sensible place, like we've done a time or two. It could mean that some process flows in a way that makes sense. Like in Note Herder, we looked at several cases where, when you create a new note, as soon as it saves the first time, the URL updates so we don't end up with content on the screen that we wouldn't get back if we visited the same URL we're on. So stuff like that. Designing URLs that don't look awful. That kind of stuff. User experience. It could mean that the back button does what someone would expect it to do at any given time, especially when you get into single-page apps like the ones we've been making with React. Sometimes the back button just doesn't do what people expect it to because of the way that you push history and stuff. So that's another reason to use a router so that you do get a sensible history. So putting thought into that kind of stuff, making it work well. Still only part 2. In the context of Tony's class, making it work well means you'll probably get a good grade. As a professional, when you reach this point, you might start getting kudos from other teams. Sales, marketing, maybe even end users will start thanking you for your work. This is what Miles and I saw when we worked at the job where we first worked together. I never told you the name of that company, or I would just say that, which would be a lot shorter than what I just said. It was called Inframe, by the way. It doesn't exist anymore. It was acquired. So back at Inframe, we started getting people from other departments telling us how much they loved this ticket system and this device management system and stuff, because it worked really well. But when you're at this stage, your own teammates may still hate your guts, because maybe your code looks like garbage. Ours certainly did at that time. So you're still not done growing, just because other people are making you feel really great about yourself and making you feel like you rule the world. But don't stop there. Can it be made better? In other words, can the code be refactored? Who knows what refactoring is? Yeah, what's refactoring?
Basically taking something that works and condensing it to be, less lines of code.
That's a good example. A formal definition, refactoring is the process of restructuring existing code without changing its behavior. Did you get that out of what he said? So it already works, and you're just making the actual code better. You're not changing the actual functionality. Refactoring improves non-functional attributes of the software. It's not enough for it to work. It's not even enough for it to work well. It needs to be written in such a way that if someone finds a way to improve it, it's possible to do so without making a huge mess. Some code is unrefactorable, for example, because there are no tests. Remember, when refactoring, you don't change the functionality. You just change the code. If you don't have tests, how can you be sure you didn't change the functionality? Because sometimes in a refactor, oh my gosh, some of the refactorings we did on that other project, we touched so many files and changed hundreds of lines of code without changing any behavior. And they were happy about it. Like, this is a good exercise because we have to keep maintaining this app. And it was a nightmare to maintain. It was a nightmare to add new features because, we had one file that was hundreds of lines long. And that's really, really difficult to maintain. So, can it be made better? Tony tells his students that if you reach this level, you'll probably get a job. As a professional, I'd say you'll probably get promoted if you reach this stage. There's still room for improvement, though. Could it work elsewhere? I interpret this a couple of different ways. One is that you make your code self-contained with as few dependencies as possible, so that if you found another problem that might have the same solution, you could drop your existing code in with minimal change. Components encourage this sort of design. Here's another way I read this. The ability to create generalized solutions that solve more than just the specific problem at hand is incredibly valuable. Say you've written something that presents data from a very specific API endpoint, like Mars rover pictures. What if you created a reusable component that could, with just a little configuration, present data from a variety of endpoints? Maybe you could even create an NPM package out of it so anyone could use it. People doing stuff like this is why we're able to do things like drop in the rich text editor that's in NoteHerder and drop in Rebase. Firebase API already existed. But somebody thought, well, it would be a little easier if we could just make it automatically sync with state. So instead of just making it automatically sync with the state in the app he was working on at the time, he made a generalized solution. And he released it to the world, and so we get to benefit from that. And you can do that too. So if you reach that stage where you write generalized solutions that other people can use, then, well, this was the end of Tony's original scale. You'll notice there's still quite a bit of room on the screen underneath it. But he tells the students that if they reach this level, they'll get a job, probably the best job. A few weeks later, though, something was nagging at him, and he decided to add to the scale. And the truth is, I think these next few points probably belong above this one. I think, could it work elsewhere? Can you make a reusable package out of it? Is still kind of the end goal. That's kind of achieving mastery. But there are some other really important points to make. Can anyone else understand it? When you're working on a team, it's not enough to make sure that it works and works well, or even that it's reusable. Other people need to be able to read your code and understand it. Even complex code, or code that solves a complex problem, can be written in a readable way. And it's really important to do that. Besides, you have to be able to read your own code. Have you ever written something, looked back at it, and had no idea what you did or why? Code is read a lot more than it's written, so make sure it's readable. Can anyone else understand it? Everyone else? Will it work in a year? In 5 years? It's impossible to make your code completely future-proof, but you can do a lot to ensure that it keeps running beyond the day you wrote it. Make sure to specify the version numbers of your dependencies. Like we saw with Rebase, that got updated to a new major version, and had we not specified in package.json on NoteHerder that we needed version 2 dot something, it would have broken. but it didn't break. So thank goodness. Don't use deprecated APIs. Sometimes when you're compiling or running npm start or npm build or whatever, you'll see in the console, things will still work, but you'll see in the console a little message that something's deprecated, that you're using something that's going out of style, which means in a future version it will probably be removed altogether. So since we were still in the process of writing thing list, we chose not to write brand new code that used an API that we knew was out of date. Note header we kept the same because it was already written and we were just going to go over it. But when we encountered that rebase upgrade, we went ahead and figured out the new API and used it, because there's just no point in using something that we know is going away. We future-proof it to the degree that we can. The whole point of this scale is to keep growing. You can always be better, and just because your code works doesn't mean you're finished and that there's no more room for improvement. So if you take nothing else out of that, take that point. Here's the whole scale again. Or no, I guess the whole scale is still up there. Questions about this? Maybe some peer pressure will work here. The afternoon class always asks lots of questions. I think they're just more curious. They are. They probably have a stronger moral constitution, and they're certainly way more fun. No, see what happens is, since I just gave the same talk in the morning, it's so much smoother in the afternoon that they understand that we have a lot more time at the end. So no, I'm just kidding. What's that? Yeah, I'm through these 8. This slideshow isn't over, but that's it for the scale of awesome. Oh, I mean basically, but it's always you're kind of always doing it over and over and over. Because on any given problem, you could still take the lazy way. And sometimes because of deadlines and so on, you have to. Sometimes there's just like, there's no reusable piece there that makes any sense. But a lot of times, at the very least, you could write it in such a way that if you decided to make it a reusable package later, it wouldn't be that hard to do. For example, the project that we were just working on, we knew a lot of what we were writing was going to be turned into NPM packages later. The legendary Dave Jones is actually doing that right now with some of the stuff that we wrote. So while we didn't actually do that part, we wrote it in such a way that it isn't that hard for him to do it, I hope. Otherwise, he's going to be cussing us when he gets here.
I do think that's an important thing to understand.
It is.
About this process in general is, no matter how much experience you have or how many things you've written, your first draft is always terrible. Like, your version that just works is always terrible. It always needs to be like, you go through every one of these steps on everything you write.
Yeah. So, yeah, the first time that you ever written something and 5 years later it still works, yep, you're done. Now you can just coast for the rest of your career. No, of course not. Of course not. This is a process. Like, have I ever gotten to step 8 on anything? Yeah. But again, this slideshow isn't over. The scale of awesomeness isn't everything. And this is just the technical capability portion of the well-rounded developer. So here's an example of, and again, I said the part 4 is really kind of the end. That really belongs at the end. It's just that Tony thought of the others later. So let me tell you a story about part 4. 10 years ago or so, when Miles and I had been working together for a little while at InFrame, we had the need to turn a web page into a PDF. Or actually, even that's a little too specific. Somebody wanted to generate PDFs out of this ticket system. And of course they don't know anything about programming, and they know that, so they didn't try to tell us, well, how about you make HTML render to PDF? They're just like, we want PDFs. Heck, maybe they were just like, we want something printable. I don't know. And anyway, I had turned HTML to PDFs before using this tool called WKHTML to PDF. WK is in WebKit, which is the engine behind Safari and used to be Chrome. So I was talking to Miles about this, and I was like, hey, so there's this utility. We could probably use that. He's like, yeah, cool. So we solved the problem real quick. And then Miles was like, man, we could turn this into a reusable library so easily. And I was like, yeah, cool. I'm gonna surf the web. You do that. And so Miles created this. It's like the Ruby equivalent of an npm package. It's called a gem. The package management system for Ruby is called Ruby Gems. And so he created a gem called Wicked PDF that just solved this problem in general. It didn't just turn the report that we needed into a PDF. It could take any kind of web content and generate a PDF out of it. And so he made a reusable library for this thing. And it's, I don't know, let's pull it up real quick. Hey, give me my cursor back, you son of a cuss ranger. What? Oh, snarf. Oh my gosh. Wicked PDF. So 2,337 people have starred this on GitHub. That's pretty good for stars. There are 120 contributors to this thing. He released it as open source, of course, because that's just the kind of people we are. And it became a thing. And one time we had one of our largest clients, not in terms of how much money they gave us, but in terms of how big the business is, hired us, me specifically, to do some mentoring to their team because they hired a bunch of people straight out of a development boot camp, and they're not local either, by the way. Some people straight out of a developer boot camp, and they just needed some guidance on Ruby and software development in general. And so we just arranged like a couple days a month. I would just sort of join their team online on a video chat and help them with whatever it was they were working on. And one of the first days I ever helped them, they were like, "Do you know anything about Wicked PDF?" And I was like, "Yeah, I sit right next to the guys who wrote it." So that was kind of a cool coincidence. So what happened is eventually Miles got really sick of maintaining this, and so Dave Jones took it over. And this was all before Fretless. So yeah, once we stole him back again, now the maintainers of Wicked PDF are all at the same company again. So anyway, that's just a little story about seeing an opportunity to create a generalized solution and doing it. And it was a very simple thing. Like the original version had almost nothing in it. It just called that command line utility and packaged it up in a way that you didn't have to do a whole lot of extra work to get it to work. And also, if you're going to make an open source library, write a good README that tells people how to actually use it. You'll notice they've done that. Anyway, awesomeness, scales.